It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
You often ask, which meditation technique is the most powerful? What will suit you best? Vipassana, Sahaj Samadhi, or perhaps Metta? Which of these will unlock your dormant potential, calm your frayed nerves, or finally bring order to your busy mind? Unfortunately, such questions immediately dismantle everything you might have achieved, leading you entirely astray. Listen closely then if you wish to remain on the true path. Better yet, pause to watch our previous video. You will see the reference appear above, so that you are fully prepared to embark on a road that leads away from these popular delusions, far from the trivial view of meditation as just another exercise machine in the spiritual fitness center of some personal growth academy. Historically, meditation, long before it evolved into a formal practice, represented an archetypal gesture. The mind's automatic reactions were turned off, blind attachment to the stream of stimuli was suspended, and consciousness began to be laid bare. It was not an achievement, but rather a desertion. Nothing was added, and things were simply allowed to fall away. It was something of a quiet initiation, like a whisper in a crowded room. Everything began there. Origins have no architecture. The first gestures left no names. And yet, even in those remote fragments, in the withdrawal, the listening, the interruption, the same attempt can be felt. Not to gain something, but to pass through that point where the mind distorts, becomes opaque, imposes itself as the only pathway. To meditate is to recognize that the mind is just one of many surfaces. Over time, what was once gesture became method. Postures stiffened into rules. Intuitions were shaped into maps. Yet every map is always only the trace of an absence. Some practices shape the void with strict elegance. To sit, do nothing. The spine rises, hands form a circle. The gaze rests upon emptiness, and everything is structured so that consciousness can dissolve. Others dissect sensation to expose the illusion of the self that feels, observing each bodily point without reaction until the link between stimulus and identity breaks down. Still others withdraw the senses like a turtle pulling into its shell, letting a space emerge where there is no longer inside or outside. But these techniques do not work in the usual sense of the word. They do not produce direct effects or guarantee results. Those who sit in search of calm often find only disorder. Those who seek emptiness encounter overload. And those who attempt to center themselves become displaced. You may wonder why this is. Your mind may demand an explanation. If so, I'll invite you once more to return to our previous video, a place where every single word is an answer and every sentence is a reason all on its own. The paradox remains constant. The more you seek, the farther you drift. Because every attempt assumes a subject who acts, and it is precisely that subject the practice begins to dismantle. Meditation is not a path toward a better condition. but the slow erosion of the very mechanism that imagines such conditions. It is a deliberate unraveling. Many stop here, but some, for reasons that remain opaque, stay. They do so not because they have finally understood, but because they have stopped trying to understand. Every technique is an empty form, a scaffold stretched around something that has no contour, not due to lack, but by its nature. There is nothing to capture, yet maps continue to be drawn, rituals assembled, and the body arranged in precise configurations, as if some threshold could emerge from precision. And sometimes it does. Sometimes, without warning, form gives way, and what remains has no name. Meditative techniques, in the end, are variations on the theme of interruption. Some lean on the body, guiding it, holding it, and slowing it down until it becomes a space. Others follow the breath, not to control it, but to be moved by it. Others still work with images, repetitions, or tonal structures that resonate beneath language. They are tools, not solutions, merely grips for hands that, in fact, are no longer grasping. The point is not what happens, but how what happens is arranged. Perspective shifts and the center dissolves. There is no outcome to achieve, only a structure to forget. And in that letting go, slow, layered, almost imperceptible, the mind changes density. It does not stop, but transforms, ceasing to take a rigid shape. What once seemed like noise reveals itself as structure, not because it has changed, but because it is no longer being filtered. Techniques differ by emphasis, not by substance. Some induce a hairline concentration, others cultivate detached observation, and others still push the cognitive system to the point of saturation. But none has the power to generate what is being sought. They can only make the obstacle visible, and then remain there until something shifts by itself. When working with repetition, for example, it is not about creating meaning, but emptying the sound of its intention. When following the breath, it is not about control, but letting it return to what it has always been, instinctive movement that does not require cognitive control. Similarly, when observing thoughts, there is no analysis, no intervention, and no pursuit. They are simply allowed to pass, like wind across an open field. And yet, thought returns. Doubt returns. The voice asking, "Am I doing it right?" reappears like a reflex. And so you begin again, not as a punishment, but simply as part of the architecture. For meditation is not a straight line. It is a spiral folding into itself, where every return is just another point on the curve. There are techniques that involve visualizing geometric forms, as well as others that act through subtraction. Some modulate internal sound, while others gradually deactivate the senses. But all share the same underlying gesture, to create a stable enough frame for something to dissolve. There is nothing to do, only something to allow. The space between two thoughts cannot be seized. You must simply let it be. The physical body in practice is not an obstacle. It is a gateway. Every tension, every micro movement, and every shadow zone is part of the landscape, with no need to escape. One can remain, simply, not to endure, but to let even discomfort organize itself into form, and from there, shift. When the body truly settles, not out of stiffness but equilibrium, everything else begins to move differently. The mind follows the body, sometimes. Yet other times it resists. But it does not matter. That too is merely a landscape for passive observation. One remains, and there is no opposition. Quiet is not forced, and silence is not manufactured. Rather, the noise is allowed to find a different rhythm. And over time, without knowing when, it becomes clear that the point was never to silence the mind, only to no longer identify with what moves. There comes a level in practice where even the technique dissolves. It is not abandoned, but ceases to be central. You may continue breathing a certain way, repeating a sound, or holding a posture, but it now happens from elsewhere. There is no longer someone doing it. There is only a structure moving by itself. And in the space that opens, clear, steady, quiet, a different quality appears. Not an emotion or a thought, but simply something that remains without weight. This is not a goal, nor is it a state. It is a platform. From there, life is lived, and from there, you act. Not from detachment, but from permeability. The mind is still present, but no longer in charge. Sensations arise, but no longer define you. Reactivity diminishes, not through effort, but through irrelevance. And in the midst, a still point with no coordinates. Everything becomes more refined, more clear, and infinitely more simple, not through a poverty of experience, but through precision. There is no longer any need to say, "I am meditating," for that distinction fades. Your interior space does not contract. Instead, it expands. Awareness distributes itself, and boundaries soften. The practice continues, but no longer needs to be called practice. And at that point, it is clear. There is nothing to reach, only a different orientation toward what already is. Techniques, structures, and references were merely mirrors. Now that the reflection has been crossed, you may still use the mirror, but you know it is not the source. And so you return to the world to speak, walk, and respond. There is no break or gap, for practice does not separate, it unifies and integrates. And while everything moves as it did before, something within no longer moves. It is not stillness, it is presence without effort. See you in the next episode.